This morning he gave me a phone call that he's wants to move on and doesn't think he's going to come back.
It was in recent seasons that the breaking news nobody saw coming about Gold Rush star Parker Schnabel truly hit home. It wasn't a new claim or a giant machine, it was the empty spaces at his side.
I just think Parker and I have different ideas and philosophies on how to do things. You know, we have totally different ideas on how to treat a crew and how to manage equipment and manage people.
First his mentor Gene, then his right-hand man Rick, then his rock Chris, and his genius mechanic Mitch. The empire was crumbling. This isn't just a story about mining gold, it's a story about the staggering personal cost of obsession, and it reveals a pattern of conflict that threatens to define Parker's entire legacy. Parker's first cracks. To understand the shocking departures that have rocked Parker Schnabel's crew, you first have to understand the man himself.
You don't need to pay for anything now. You start a tab.
Appreciate that, really do.
I'm more than happy. I know how hard it is when you're first starting out.
That's awesome.
You owe me a hug.
Yeah, for sure, buddy. Nice seeing you again.
To put it mildly, Parker was born into a gold mining legacy. His grandfather, the legendary John Schnabel, was a Klondike icon, a man who staked his claim and worked the land with an old-school grit that is the stuff of folklore. When Parker took over the family business at the tender age of 16, many saw it as a kid playing in a sandbox. They could not have been more wrong. With a drive that bordered on obsession, Parker didn't just continue his grandfather's legacy, he supercharged it.
Parker has been extremely successful to accomplish what he's done. I'm proud of him.
He turned a small-scale operation into a colossal, earth-moving enterprise that would rewrite the record books. You see, by his mid-20s, he had mined well over $50 million in gold. This is a truly mind-boggling achievement. That is more gold than most seasoned miners, men twice or three times his age, will see in their entire lives. He became the undisputed boy king of the Klondike. But what many overlooked in the shine of all that gold was the immense, crushing pressure that came with it. Parker wasn't just a miner, he was a boss responsible for a multi-million-dollar budget and the livelihoods of a dozen crew members, many of whom were old enough to be his father. The most shocking fact is the sheer scale of his operation. At his peak, he was leasing thousands of acres of land, and his weekly expenses for fuel, parts, and payroll could easily top $100,000. Let's put that in perspective. A single one of his massive D10 dozers can burn over 20 gallons of diesel fuel per hour. With a fleet of dozers, excavators, and rock trucks running around the clock, his fuel bill alone could skyrocket to over $300,000 a month. They move literal mountains of dirt, tons and tons of earth every single day, all to capture just a few ounces of gold.
In this season, we've bought 2 D10s. This one I'm driving was 1.5 million bucks. The other one was $1 million. And we still don't have an ounce of gold to show for any of this.
The thing nobody tells you is that in this game, every single minute the machines aren't running, he is losing thousands of dollars. This terrifying reality forged Parker into a demanding, hard-driving leader. He pushed his crew, his equipment, and himself to the absolute limit, 7 days a week for months on end. There are no weekends, no holidays, only the short, frantic Yukon mining season. This intense environment simply wasn't for everyone. Early on, the cracks began to show. Viewers might remember Jeremy LeBlanc, a mechanic who lasted just 1 day before quitting, unable to handle the relentless pace. He was, as Parker put it, a city guy who had no idea what he was getting into. Then there was Denise Savini, a more experienced operator whose disruptive behavior and clashes with the team led to him being publicly fired. These were the early warning signs. While Parker was building a reputation as a gold-finding prodigy, he was also developing a reputation as a boss who was, to put it mildly, incredibly difficult to work for. The thing nobody tells you is that in the Klondike, your crew is your lifeline. The isolation is extreme, the work is brutal, and the season is short. A breakdown, either mechanical or personal, can cost you a fortune. Parker's initial success was built on the backs of a few key, loyal veterans who could handle his intensity. But that loyalty was about to be tested like never before. He was asking his team to move mountains, and for a while they did. But every person has a breaking point. He had built an empire, but it was standing on a foundation that was beginning to fracture. Why Rick, Chris, and Mitch left. The breaking news that nobody saw coming wasn't one single event, but a slow, painful exodus of the very people who had made Parker's success possible. It was a pattern of departure that left fans stunned and Parker's empire suddenly vulnerable. The three biggest losses, Rick, Chris, and Mitch, each represented a different kind of failure. First, there was Rick Ness. Rick was Parker's long-suffering right-hand man, the foreman who was always there through thick and thin. He was the loyal soldier. But what many overlooked was the constant grinding pressure Parker put on him. On camera, Parker would relentlessly hassle Rick, overlooking progress to point out the smallest mistake. As Rick himself said, nobody wants to bust their ass and be hassled for it.
It's not that I don't like it that he shows up down here, it's that he always overlooks great progress to try to tear you down. Nobody wants to bust their ass and be hassled for it.
After years of being in Parker's shadow, Rick didn't just quit. He did the unimaginable. He became a direct competitor. He launched his own mining operation, turning their professional relationship into a bitter personal rivalry. This wasn't just losing an employee, it was creating an enemy. As if losing his top foreman wasn't enough, another pillar of the crew was about to crumble: Chris Dumit. Chris wasn't just a skilled operator, he was the heart and soul of the team. A veteran miner with a calm demeanor, he was the father figure in a group of young, hard-charging miners. He was the steady hand, the voice of reason, the good cop to Parker's bad cop. What many overlooked was that Chris did more than just run the gold room. He managed the crew's morale. His departure was a seismic shock, and he didn't just quit. In the ultimate twist, he left to go work for Rick Ness. This wasn't just a business move, it felt like a deep betrayal. The man who had been Parker's rock since he was a teenager was now working for the competition. The final straw was reportedly an argument over running a third wash plant, a move Chris felt was stretching the crew too thin. Then came the final, devastating blow, the exit of Mitch Blaschke. Mitch was Parker's mechanical genius. In the remote Yukon, you can't just call a repairman or order a part on Amazon. A broken machine can shut down an entire operation for days. A good mechanic isn't just important, they are everything. And Mitch was one of the best. He could fix anything, often using scrap parts and sheer ingenuity.
We didn't have all the right fittings to build a whole new hose, so what I did is splice this one and put one section of new hose on there, so it should be enough to get it back up and running.
The most shocking fact is how much Parker depended on him. Mitch was on call 24/7, responsible for a fleet of aging, multi-million-dollar equipment that was constantly being pushed to its breaking point. After years of this relentless grind, Mitch announced he was leaving. There was no big fight, no dramatic blow-up. It was a quiet exit driven by pure, unadulterated burnout. The endless seasons of mud, grease, and stress had finally caught up with him. He wanted a life outside of the mine, time with his family that the Yukon simply couldn't offer. For Parker, this was a disaster. He had lost his right-hand man and rival in Rick, his emotional anchor in Chris, and now his mechanical backbone in Mitch. The Golden Empire was suddenly and incredibly vulnerable. The three men who had been instrumental in his rise to the top were all gone. An echo of the past. This great exodus of his most trusted lieutenant seemed shocking, but the thing nobody tells you is that it wasn't a new problem. It was a pattern. To understand the departures of Rick, Chris, and Mitch, you have to look back at the first major crack in Parker's management style, the ghost of Gene Cheeseman. Before Rick Ness was his right-hand man, Parker relied on the expertise of a seasoned mining veteran named Gene Cheeseman. Gene was a legend in his own right, a tough, no-nonsense foreman from the Big Nugget mine. He knew how to move dirt and find gold, and he had decades of experience to prove it. When Parker hired him, it was a major coup. He brought a level of experience and authority that the young crew desperately needed. For a while, the partnership worked wonders. They moved record amounts of dirt and had their most profitable seasons to date. But not all things are what they seem. Under the surface, a massive power struggle was brewing. You see, Parker, despite his youth, was the boss. He was the one taking the enormous financial risks, and he had to make the final calls. Gene, with his decades of experience, often disagreed with Parker's aggressive, high-risk strategies. What started as professional disagreement slowly grew into open frustration. What many overlooked was the core of their conflict. Gene's methods were old school, safe, steady, and methodical. He believed in preparing the ground properly, in taking the time to do it right. Parker, driven by that $100,000 a week burn rate, wanted to move faster. He wanted to cut corners on prep and chase the pay dirt now. Gene saw this as reckless, a way to break equipment and endanger the crew. Parker saw Gene's caution as costing him money. The tension finally boiled over in a now infamous confrontation, where Parker accused Gene of a lot of tail wagging the dog around here.
I'd rather not find out about your schedule by looking at the calendar in Ed's office. You know, shoot me an email with what you're thinking.
Well, I told you that I was going to be around that time.
Right, I'd rather just shoot me an email.
Well, I didn't.
Let me know before
I told you that.
I'm finding out everything by going in Ed's office.
I told you, Parker, there's no secret. I told you before we left that we'd see how things went between the 15th and the 20th.
Right, and I just would rather you shoot me an email about it.
Okay, well, we talked about that, so.
Yeah, you know, a lot of tail wagging the dog around here.
It was about more than just a schedule, it was about respect. Gene felt his decades of experience were being completely ignored. He felt undermined by a boss young enough to be his son. The constant arguments finally reached a boiling point. Gene Cheeseman quit, leaving Parker without a foreman in the middle of a crucial season. His departure was the first major sign that Parker's relentless drive could cost him his most valuable people. It proved that even incredible success and huge gold totals couldn't keep a top-tier crew member if they felt disrespected. Many people are crazy about Parker's results, but they often don't see the human cost. The loss of Gene was a hard lesson, but the later departures of Chris and Mitch raised a difficult question. Had Parker really learned anything from it at all? He was doomed to repeat his mistakes, but this time the stakes were even higher. Replacing the irreplaceable. Faced with an empty throne room, Parker Schnabel found himself at a crossroads. He had lost his top foreman, his moral compass, and his mechanical genius. His empire was on the brink. He could have scaled back, admitted the pressure was too much, and run a smaller, more manageable operation. Instead, he did what he has always done. He doubled down. To put it mildly, Parker's response to this crisis was to prove that his empire was not built on any single person, but on his own unbreakable will to succeed. The departures, while painful, forced an evolution.
I can't help but blame myself. You know, those are my decisions, and I guess I have to live with them.
Parker, the boy king, had to finally become Parker, the seasoned leader. First, he went on the offensive and began to aggressively invest in a new generation of miners. He brought in fresh faces like Brennan Rouault and Tyson Lee, young, hungry guys who were not just willing to match his intense work ethic, but who saw him as a living legend. This subtly shifted the entire crew dynamic. He was no longer the young kid trying to prove himself to older, more experienced men. He was now the established king training his new court. These new miners were loyal to him and his system from day one, but he also had to fundamentally change his own role. With Mitch Blaschke gone, the most shocking fact is that Parker himself had to become the lead mechanic. He was forced to spend more time covered in grease with a wrench in his hand, personally diagnosing complex hydraulic failures in the middle of a freezing night, a burden that Mitch had always shouldered for him. This act, however, earned him a new, different kind of respect from his new crew. He wasn't just the boss pointing fingers, he was in the mud with them. The most controversial wild theory whispered around the Yukon, however, is that Parker was forced to change his entire business model. To stop the revolving door, he allegedly abandoned the old system of salaries and small bonuses. Instead, he began offering his key people, like foreman Tyson Lee, significant cuts of the profits. This is a life-changing deal. He wasn't just hiring employees, he was making partners. This move, potentially costing him millions up front, was a desperate, brilliant gamble to buy the loyalty he could no longer command through friendship alone. Finally, he hedged his bets with technology. He made a massive, multi-million-dollar investment in cutting-edge prospecting tech. We're talking advanced ground-penetrating radar and sophisticated drill programs. His grandfather John read the land. Parker scans it. This new tech allowed him to pinpoint the richest pay streaks with surgical precision, taking the guesswork out of mining. It meant his less experienced crew could be even more efficient than his old-school veterans. He was replacing decades of human experience with cutting-edge data. What do you think? Is Parker a ruthless genius or a boss who burns out his best people? Let us know your thoughts. Like and subscribe for more.